Hello everybody, welcome back to Munro Live. My name is Scott Hoffman, and today we're going to spend a little bit of time going over some kind of first impressions and a review of the Audi Q4 E-Tron Sportback. And actually the full name on this, because it's a mouthful, it's a 2022 Audi Q4 E-Tron Sportback Q50 Prestige. It's like a kind of a mouthful there, but this is essentially the highest trim level variant of this vehicle. This one, as equipped, is about $61,000 MSRP. The vehicle has an 82 kilowatt hour battery. It's got about 241 or 42 miles of electric range, and between its two electric motors, it's got a permanent magnet AC motor in the rear and an induction motor in the front. Between those two motors combined, it has about 295 horsepower and about 339 foot-pounds of torque. So, you know, it's an ample offering, but as we'll get into it more here, this vehicle's not going to blow you away, but I don't think necessarily that it was intended to. So we'll get into some more of those specifics here. But I would say another high-level statistic just to kind of be aware of as we get into this. So at previous times, you might have heard us talk about the Volkswagen ID.4, other ID vehicles. So Volkswagen has this thing that they call a platform, the MEB platform, which is an acronym for a collection of German words that roughly translates to Modular Electric Toolkit. And what they do with this MEB platform is essentially they have a skeleton of electrified architecture that they use across multiple vehicles to try and keep their design costs low and basically change things as little as possible from one model to the next so that they can kind of accelerate the time to market. So this Q4 Sportback E-Tron, Quattro, all those names, it shares basically the underpinnings of a Volkswagen ID.4. And in some ways, architectural commonality is good, but in this case, reception of the ID.4 has really honestly not been that great. And a lot of people that have reviewed it have pointed out some of the struggles it's had. So in this case, the fact that it shares a lot with an ID.4 is maybe not the best thing, and we'll kind of get into that. But, you know, it's an interesting offering, right? As you think about Audi, and obviously they're a subsidiary child of the Volkswagen Auto Group, so same ownership there. But, you know, you think about Audis, it's a premium German luxury OEM. The things you would expect to see on it versus what we're actually going to see here, we'll walk around and kind of point out some of those differences. But I think this is definitely a sort of a lower cost Audi compared to things maybe we've seen in the past. And it's an interesting, you know, you can think of it like a kind of a churched up ID.4, I guess would be the best way to call it. So let's start to work our way around here. We'll point out some of those features. I will say, as far as the styling, especially compared to an ID.4, I do think it's a pretty handsome vehicle, honestly. So this is the Sportback configuration. And if we work around the side here, so the Q4 e-tron, they have it in two sort of body profiles. One is more of a conventional SUV profile, where this roofline would be flatter and come back. This one is what they call the Sportback. So it comes back in sort of this tall Super Coupe configuration that honestly, like a Model Y, kind of has that look as well. And some of the, you know, like a Mercedes GLC would have that same feel. So this has that sloping roofline. You're going to compromise a little bit on cargo space and interior volume because of that, but it gives it kind of this sleek look. Working our way around the sides here. So some kind of neat painted cladding on the bottom side here, but one thing I'll notice, or I'll point out that you notice that is less typical on sort of today's vehicles is you're seeing a fair amount of molten color grained black plastic on here. So this is, and it's something that you see on some vehicles, but usually it's on lower price class stuff. So when we say molten color, this means that there's no secondary painting operation. Essentially, this is coming out of the injection molded tool looking exactly like that. So you add the grain to give it a little bit of an aesthetic appeal, but this is like, you know, if you looked at like base models of cars, you see more molten color plastic. And even like on the bottoms of the doors, this door cladding, it's painted here. Typically on lower cost vehicles, your cladding and your fender flares would be the same molten color grained black plastic. So kind of interesting, like they're spending the money here, but this is definitely sort of a low cost approach. You see some more of that, and increasingly on exteriors, we're seeing more of the gloss piano black instead. So you're seeing these things in this vehicle, right? We'll work around the exterior, talk about the interior as well, but you're seeing these things where, okay, you might think it's an Audi, it should be like the best of everything, but not quite in some areas. And another thing I'll point out here, and this is probably more of a legacy or a testament to the fact that it's on the MEB platform, but if you look at the brakes in the rear here, and if we come in, you'll see that this brake setup, this is actually a drum brake in the rear, which is By today's standards, pretty atypical, but we would note that on the MEB platform, when we looked at the ID.4, this is something that Volkswagen has decided to do, right? So normally these days you see disc brakes with a floating caliper back there. Drums are kind of a step backward, probably functionally appropriate for the vehicle, but really honestly, their performance is going to be a little less, their cost is going to be lower, so that's why you would make that decision. But it is surprising to see that this is the first vehicle with an Audi badge that I've seen with drum brakes in recent memory. Honestly, even in my life, I don't think I've seen an Audi with drum brakes back there. I'm sure at some point it had some, but again, low cost despite being, the Audi nameplate and vehicle here. Working our way around the back. So again, pretty handsome styling, I would say. They did a good job with the lighting on this vehicle, kind of this slim profile. This has become pretty common. They have some neat animation when this vehicle's powered on, meaning that the lights can do some different things. They also have a pretty impressive set of headlamps up front, digital matrix LEDs. That is probably one of the stylistic hallmarks of this vehicle as well. You can choose different animations, so it does sort of different light sequences when you come up to the vehicle. Kind of cool, kind of clever, definitely somewhere they're spending the money. There is one thing on the back of this that I do really like that is a cost-conscious move. You can see if we look down at the bumper here, the E-Tron distinction, so E-Tron, is actually embossed within the bumper fascia. So it's kind of a neat, this is something that you see on a lot of tailgates on pickup trucks these days. And they're doing that by stamping it into the sheet metal of the tailgate to say Tacoma or say Chevrolet or Ford or whatever. I know my Tacoma has that in the back, and then people will buy stickers and put them in there to show it off. But instead of adding another badge that's $5 or $10 to be plated plastic and stick proud of the vehicle, they just went ahead and put that in the injection molded tool. Didn't need to add a separate part or 5 separate letters, and still gets the point across. It's kind of sleek and it definitely saves costs. So I'm a fan of that low cost maneuver there. But again, continuing to work our way around, we see some more molding color grained black plastic here, which is and actually this even looks molding color, which is wild if that is the case. Yeah, wow, I'm gonna have to actually point that out to someone. If that's molding color, like metallic looking, that's actually pretty impressive, again, as a low cost maneuver, but again, not what you typically expect to see on an Audi. And then let me preface this too. I love VW stuff. I have a Volkswagen flag on the wall in my garage. I've owned a bunch of VWs. The one Audi I've owned was an old TT. I have no beef with Volkswagen or Audi for that matter. It's just speaking about what I expect typically to see on an Audi, this is a little bit not what I would have expected when we got this vehicle. This feels like a pretty normal vehicle. They've got it's not way out there stylistically or crazy Spartan or futuristic. They've got actual physical HVAC controls on here. They've got a fair amount of buttons. The screen's not enormous. It's kind of normal looking. They have a conventional cluster. They do have a heads-up display, which is nice. The shifter's a little bit weird here. This is what they would call a monostable shifter, meaning as you move it, it returns to a single position. My wife's Grand Cherokee has something like this, and some people think they're a little frustrating because it doesn't actually move to a different position when you go to the different drive modes. So with this, it just returns back to that, and you just have to be aware of looking at the lights to see if I'm okay in drive, neutral, reverse, etc. I did think it was interesting too, on this vehicle, it has a neutral position, which is kind of atypical for EVs at this point. And if it's in that and I let off the brake, I think it was telling me that the vehicle would roll if I wasn't careful or something like that. But yeah, if you look at the screen here, to allow the vehicle to roll, the vehicle must be stationary. We'll see if we can get back to that. Yeah, vehicle must be stationary, neutral must be selected, and the brake pedal must be pressed. Kind of interesting. There are scenarios where you might want a vehicle to roll, like in a car wash or something. Not as typical to have that on an EV. So prevalently displayed. The other thing that I noticed with this vehicle, it's kind of convenient at times, but at other times I know I've heard other people complain about it. So I'm in the driver's seat, all my screens are on, everything's on. If I step out of this seat, everything immediately starts to shut down, which I guess if you're just if one person driving a car all the time, that's fine, but like what if I don't know, I just could see, like I know at home if I, the wife and the child are in the car and you, oh crap, I forgot this, you go to run inside and like all the HVAC then shuts off. Seems like that would be kind of annoying. So maybe that's a feature you can adjust. I'm not really sure, but I can see how that would be maybe less desirable. So otherwise, you know, looking around the interior, I think it's definitely an improvement over the ID.4 in terms of it looks better. Some of the styling's nicer. It has the appearance of being nicer. But I think that the reality is, personally, for this vehicle, I'm just going to struggle with believing that it's anything other than a churched up MEB vehicle, which unfortunately, you know, once you set an architecture, you're kind of committed to that direction. So, you know, performance-wise, this vehicle, 5.8 seconds, 0 to 60, you know, that's pretty slow in today's terms for a dual motor all-wheel drive EV. The slowest variant of the Model Y with 2 motors is about 4.4 seconds, 0 to 60, and the fastest is like 3.4 seconds. So almost twice as fast, 0 to 60. And at this point, you know, at an MSRP of $61K, this vehicle is more expensive now than the base Model Y, and even the performance Model Y, I think, starts at 56 now. So I don't see many people making that choice for this one. I think the last thing we'll kind of wrap up with, I just popped the hood here. Because no vehicle is complete without a review of what's under the hood. And in this case, I think what we're going to see is another hallmark of the MEB platform, which is that they don't have a frunk. Also a little bit curious that they have a prop rod here. A lot of people just use hydraulic struts to hold the hood up. Definitely a low-cost move there. Again, not something you usually see on an Audi. But with this, I would say the frunk thing, I know this will excite some people. I don't really have a huge problem with not having a frunk because, frankly, I think it's not a space that gets used as much as some people might think. I feel like it's a little bit of a novelty on EVs. Obviously, they don't have one. As an engineer, I like to be able to see what's inside, so I'm okay with it. I will say, so a lot of this, again, is not going to be crazy new or novel. It's similar to other Volkswagens we've looked at recently. This kind of big protrusion here is part of their HVAC case. They use what's called a split HVAC case where half of it's in the engine bay now and half is in the cabin. A little bit different than conventional ICE vehicles. Something that I thought that was really interesting here, and I'm looking forward to getting into this more. Hopefully we can tear one of these down, but this function right here, or this feature, so you can see it kind of looks like a tube with like a cloth wrap on it. But what it actually is, if we were looking at this a little closer, so the back of this is a frame that holds the cooling fans in the cooling pack. And you've got a heat exchanger in here, a radiator. And something that vehicles do these days is, especially with EVs, right, for aero reasons, and there's times when you actually want things to heat up. So a cooling pack's all about rejecting heat. There are times when you want to keep that heat and get things up to temp. So to do that, you want to close off airflow over that heat exchanger. And what they do with this feature, this actually isn't a tube, that's a bar that can spin. And with this, I don't know if we can see down in here very far, but this is actually, here, I'm going to spread it a little. So if we look down in here, this is actually a curtain. This is a textile, and you can see I'm kind of flapping it there. So if you think of like some sunroofs have like a cover that goes over it, that's what this is. This is a scrolling, like there's a motor on the side here. This thing would roll up. So they're doing their, what is normally done with a system called active grille shutters, where people have these vanes that they open and close. They're actually doing it with a curtain, opening it up and down. Kind of different. Probably more weight efficient. I'd be interested to like lay it out from a cost perspective and see what it looks like. But yeah, kind of neat, something different. I hadn't noticed that before. So much like any vehicle, right, there's always good and bad to point out. There are things I like about this vehicle. There are things I don't. For the money, I think it's not a great value proposition. I probably wouldn't buy one, but it certainly looks a lot better than an ID.4. I'll give them that. So I think that's about all I got. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for joining the channel. Hopefully you found something insightful. And yeah, look forward to seeing you next time.